Business over drinks. Business over drinks. This is Dave and Tom. This is business over drinks.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Business Over Drinks. My name is Teng and I'm calling in from Singapore.
Hello. My name's David, calling in from Australia. How are you doing? Thanks for tuning in. And once again, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, or whatever. We're everywhere on social media. Every little bit counts.
As usual,
Stuttering
Dave
already.
puts his unique spin on every single introduction that we do. Usually it's because of mistakes. So we've got a really exciting episode coming up right now. Before I do a quick introduction about our guests, I just kind of want to share a couple of really quick updates. One is, as David mentioned, we're on every single social media platform out there, so please make sure that you like and subscribe. The other thing is we've got some really, we're going to start putting out more and more episodes. I think we took a little bit of a break in between. Dave got married, I got a bit lazy, and then we didn't do a lot of stuff. But more episodes are coming out soon. All right, so as we jump into our latest guest, we've got a really special one today. So we've got a guest with, I think one of my most favorite names in the world, James Puddle. He's the CEO and founder of One Global Group, which is a residential development and investment. I'm sorry, what am I saying? is actually a really boutique real estate agency business, right? So James has actually worked in residential development and investment sector for over a decade, and he began his career in one of the largest London real estate agent called Hamptons International at the time, where he spent over 5 years. Then he moved to Strutt Parker, and then he spent further 6 years working within the residential development team. He focuses specifically on residential development, consultancy, and overseas project management. Now, in 2017, James actually spotted an opportunity in the marketplace and moved his entire family to Singapore, where he founded One Global Group. So that's really, really fascinating, James. The company is headquartered in Singapore. It's got regional offices in Hong Kong, KL, as well as offices in Dubai, South Africa, London, and regionally Birmingham as well. Welcome to the podcast, James, and apologies for giving you a really, really
Thank
weird
you very much
introduction.
for having me, guys. It's great to be here, and I'm glad you like the name.
It's my favorite name so far. We usually had like pretty standard names. This is my favorite,
That's
favorite so
not
far.
what my wife
Anyway, James, so we're gonna jump straight into it, but before we we'd like to really introduce our drinks. I know you've got the most unique and best drinks, so we're gonna let you start.
says.
What drink are you
I'm
drinking,
afraid I've got
James?
water today. I did. I'm an hour about having a glass of wine or something, but as it's early in the week, I thought I'd stick to some water.
We're gonna go one step up from there. I'm actually drinking a bottle of Coke, Coke Zero to be exact, and it's the tiniest bottle I've ever seen in my life.
That is an empty
Another-
bottle, mate.
Oh yeah, I'm drinking it here, but it's
Oh,
in
okay.
a beefeater gin glass.
Oh,
So,
That looks like a frat party glass.
oh, it's a metal cup
Is it?
from beefeater gin. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Dave, what are you drinking, man? You're the only one who seems to actually be drinking alcohol.
Yeah, so I'm drinking some great organic wine. I had it in the last episode, courtesy of Winesmiths. It's from South Australia, and I'm absolutely loving it. So they sent me a few boxes of it. And my wife and I keep downing it, and it's great. So
Very good.
I'm going to enjoy this podcast.
So, just a quick note about Winesmiths. They sent me some stuff as well. Unfortunately, I drank all of it because I also drank it during a podcast, but also drank with a couple of friends. So there's nothing left on my side, but it was really, really enjoyable.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I really enjoyed it.
Some people typecast organic wine, or some people are fearful of organic wine simply for being organic, but the flavor profile is like it's still good. It's great.
Thanks, Dave. Winesmith's going to send you some cash later. So James, I know time's a little bit short, so we're going to jump straight into the questions because I think first of all, thanks for joining us on the podcast, and I'm sure you're regretting your decision right now, but too late. You're already stuck here. Maybe you can share a little bit more because I mentioned during introduction that you actually spotted a gap in the marketplace, right? So an opportunity at least. What was that gap exactly?
Okay, so probably sort of winding it back a bit. I mean, for years before relocating to Asia, I was working for some of the bigger London-based consultancy firms and spent a lot of time. Part of my job then was to help them build their network in Asia and the Middle East. So spent a lot of time kind of back and forth over a long period of time doing business out here. And there were many reasons for taking the jump and quitting my comfortable career in London and moving out here to set up a real estate company. Partly my wife is half Singaporean, so we had lots of family out here, so there was a bit of logic to it. And I just, to be honest, just over the years, I quite fancied taking the jump and setting up my own real estate business. Didn't know where that was. We wanted to move to Asia, and I just saw that there, to create a boutique, sort of good quality, high quality service boutique company out here, selling to start with. I mean, we've now diversified, but originally the intent was to be able to market UK residential new construction projects out here in Asia, and to really cut out a layer for consumers that were buying, rather than dealing with London-based consultancy companies, and from the developer's point of view, to deal directly with the source out here. So that was kind of part of the intent to start with, and saw a bit of a gap in the market to really do something that was experienced brokers that would offer a high quality boutique service, really, rather than the bigger companies. That was where it started, or that was where the concept started.
Yeah, so that's interesting because did you have so you went straight to Singapore? Was how much research was involved, or did you have pre-existing clients who kind of gave you your first leg up in business? Because that's a big shift of going from UK
Yeah, no, it was.
to
Yeah, no,
Singapore.
well, yeah, no, I did. I had, over, I suppose, probably sort of over 3 years before I decided to take the jump and do it. There were certainly clients in London, that were very interested to help support in the event that I actually took the jump and did it. I think the catalyst, if I'm honest, that ended up, well, two things really, is I have two children who were young at the time, and I spent most of my life on airplanes. So I think my wife was probably, we were newly married and had kids, and she was close to divorcing me. The amount of time I spent on long haul flights out to Asia, and Brexit in the UK. So Brexit happened, and that was another catalyst, really, because the market out here had been very buoyant for a number of years, and then it had got tougher. And really, that's the best time to set up a business, when things are tough. So what I mean by that is a lot of the companies that were selling UK real estate out in Singapore, everyone had it very easy for a number of years. It was just simply, I call it order taking. It was very easy. The market was buoyant. Then things got more difficult, and you really at that point then needed really experienced brokers that consumers trusted to buy that real estate asset overseas, to invest overseas. So that's kind of the angle that we took. We came in and set the business up in a difficult market. Lots of developer clients usually invest lots of money to do these big road shows, and that became more difficult. So one of the things we've done here in Singapore, early on, is that we thought, right, how can we reduce our developer clients' costs to bring their projects, entry to market their product out here without having the huge costs. So we've taken a big old shop house here just off Orchard Road, and we have used that over the last sort of 4 years to run events and those sorts of things as well. And we've got a bit of a name for it now. So it was kind of, how could I enter the market, create an experienced team that could offer kind of end-to-end service, and reduce our clients' costs and exposure in the market.
James, that was really interesting, right? The fact that the reasons behind opening up shop in Singapore, I think it's pretty straightforward for you. I think the gap in the market, made sense from a family perspective, right? But if someone is looking to actually open up a company in Singapore, because it's from my understanding, it's really easy to open up companies in Singapore, especially when as a foreigner. Did you face any specific hurdles in setting
Do
up
you know
shop
what?
here?
I mean, you're right. I mean, in fact, I mean, the easiest bit was setting up the company. Actually, I mean, Singapore make it very easy to do that, and everything was pretty straightforward. I sought advice and used a corporate secretarial service, and it was all pretty easy. The difficult bit as a foreigner, which always remains a risk, is employment passes. So, you can set up a company as a foreigner, but then you need to have an employment pass or a pass to be able to live here, and that was actually probably the biggest barrier, because ultimately they want lots of information for you and a business plan and everything else. So, and then you've got to go through a process which is still a risk of being able to get that employment pass. So, yeah, easy to set up a company, but I'd say that was the biggest barrier, was then being able to reside here and operate the business. Now we've grown, that's easier, but I'd say that was the biggest barrier to entry.
And there's a bit of an investment required, right? Is it
I
250,000
mean,
or
again,
something like
it
that?
varies. It varies depending on the type of company that you're setting up. But yeah, broadly speaking, that's correct. There's many different types of entity and company you can set up, and it depends on the ownership structure as well. Whether it's wholly owned by in Singapore, whether you've got foreign shareholders. So there are different ways of doing it, but overall, it's pretty straightforward. It's just that employment pass that you then need, and then how many employment passes you can get for foreigners versus locals, etc. Once you've set up. Our company has now grown, and we've got different companies under the group of companies in Singapore, that enable us to sort of operate and employ more people.
So people might not know this, but actually, I had to get an employment pass when I was in Singapore because I'm actually originally not Singaporean. So yeah, I understand your struggle. I definitely understand your struggle. Then I became Singaporean, set up my own company. It took me
Yeah,
about 15 minutes. It was the fastest thing I've ever done in my life. It was 15 minutes. I walked in and out of the corporate secretary office. Everything was set, registered, and I got an official email saying good to go. I'm like, thank you. So I never actually
yeah, it's
experienced it as a
very
foreigner
it's
before.
very efficient in Singapore. That's one of the brilliant things about doing business and living in Singapore. Very efficient.
It's so good. Speaking of efficiency, what would you say are the significant benefits of if you're setting up shop in Singapore compared to other places in Southeast Asia, for example, maybe Thailand or Hong Kong?
I'm in KL because you did open up
Yeah,
a
no,
regional office in
I
KL as
mean,
well. Yeah.
I'd say in the sort of scheme of things, Singapore's definitely been the easiest. Hong Kong, a little bit more cumbersome, but again, not too. To be honest, they've all been fairly straightforward. It's administering things from afar. I mean, if you take Hong Kong for example, operating a business there and bank accounts and things like that, particularly throughout COVID and not being able to travel there, I'd say it's fairly archaic compared to Singapore and how that side of things works. But yeah, overall pretty straightforward. But Singapore's definitely the easiest.
No, that's something that I guess I feel a little bit of pride in being Singaporean now. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Um, I mean, so touching on that, right? So let's take a step. Let's take a step forward. I think from that one because what you're mentioning is when you're setting up offices in KL, in Hong Kong, in other Dubai, and a few other countries, right? So, like, what drove the need to actually expand your company globally? Like, besides, you just saw more opportunity there, but also, what have you learned in the process of scaling? Because I mean,
Yeah, it
it has its
definitely
own
has its own
challenges.
challenges. I would say, look, I mean, we've been fairly fortunate with our growth. I mean, actually, probably most of our growth, ironically, has come throughout the period of COVID. So I was very very lucky with timing. So about 12 months before COVID, Singapore was obviously our first office, and Hong Kong was our second office. Hong Kong closely followed by Malaysia. Um, but Hong Kong, we took over another business, and we rebranded it, and we inherited their database and their team and everything else. But we did that about 12 months before COVID. And the reason that was a very lucky and fortuitous thing to do was because we're primarily selling overseas real estate. When COVID hit, Singapore for us, which was very good prior to COVID, just almost stopped overnight. Business pretty much stopped. The borders closed. People were not investing overseas. certainly for the first kind of 3 to 6 months, it was very, very challenging. But having set up Hong Kong, and at that point we were only a small team. I think we've now got about staff of about 15 there. But prior to when we first set up, it was just a team of 3 or 4, and we've grown that significantly throughout COVID. But the situation in Hong Kong that's been going on, and the riots and everything else before COVID, and then COVID, Hong Kong was a bit of a bubble that really picked up during COVID. So a lot of our business significantly took off throughout that period, whereas Singapore didn't. And the point I'm trying to make in terms of growth is that one of the main reasons that I wanted to do that even before COVID was just diversification and having different markets, so that we weren't reliant on business just from one location, and that proved to be the right strategy at the time, because different markets are performing depending on what's going on locally, domestically, different situations. So that's been really critical for us. And the other thing that we've really done is diversify. I mean, when COVID hit, our business just focused on selling overseas property in the UK into Asia. That was our core focus. We've now really diversified. We were highly reliant on doing events for about 85% of our business. Meeting how we met clients and how we sold our property. And we're now probably coming out of COVID. We're probably 10% reliant on that, and 90% reliant on lots of other things, fundamental, other kind of foundations that we've laid throughout COVID. We do commercial property now. We've got a prop tech side of the business. We focus on Australia market and not just the UK, and we focus on the Singapore market. So, we've really kind of diversified and expanded into those markets as well. The question that you said about how's that been it's been difficult. It's had its challenges, and more, I suppose, growing and not being able to travel. That's been really difficult throughout that period, but it's getting easier now.
Dave, can I cut in, because I actually got an interesting follow up for that, right? Because you mentioned that you pivoted from a very event based lead generation or sales focus, right? How were you able to what was were you able to pivot? Because everyone had to pivot at that point. But how were you able to pivot, and what were some of the biggest issues / challenges you faced when you were pivoting?
I think one of the biggest issues was that, well, I mean, suddenly, and we weren't prepared for a lot of the online stuff, and obviously a lot of consumers that were buying our product. It was very much before COVID. You met in person, face to face, and that's how that trust was built up, and that's how we sold our product at the end of the day. So I think that certainly took a while. Now everyone's adjusted to this, right? We can all sit and have a chat over Zoom and have a chat over, and it's like normal because we're now so used to it. So I think that was a big issue for a while, and then it became a very crowded market. Online is where we started to go, like everyone else, and online became very, very crowded. Lots of webinars and all that sort of stuff. So it was how to, at the beginning, at the initial period, that was relatively easy. But then as COVID went on, how to sort of stand out and find different ways of doing things, and then the tools that we use to market ourselves and market our product. I suppose that those were some of the challenges for sure.
Yeah, speaking of marketing, real estate industry is a massive but highly competitive industry, right? How do you guys manage to stand out through COVID, through now, I guess, with the big pickup and inflation and everything else that's going on in the world? How do you stand out?
We've got a pretty good platform now in terms of not just. I mean, one thing that we have spent a lot of time working on is our I call it our sort of distribution network. So our partners, both regionally and globally. So we're very fortunate to have a lot of good clients and a lot of good product. Product has not been our problem. It was then really kind of building that distribution network outside of just direct marketing and things. So we built an online platform that enables our partners to be able to have access to and sell our product through that platform, and then we do all the back end service and everything else. So that's kind of how we've scaled things up. But yeah, it's definitely a crowded market. There's no doubt about that. And, we're definitely not perfect in that respect. And I'd say there's quite a lot of disrupt, particularly in the Singapore market, less so in other locations. There's quite a lot of, particularly the property space, there's quite a lot of sort of disruptors in the market, and they do things differently. So, I don't disrespect what they're doing, but we're trying to come at it from a slightly different angle, that we offer that kind of consultancy approach and different layers and trusted advisor, and we can add value that way rather than I'm a kind of property guru and I know everything, come to us. And I think that's sort of our positioning. So we're not going after that, but we're just trying to differentiate ourselves through through our core focus, if that makes sense, and all the kind of additional services we can add as a business.
No, that definitely makes sense. I mean, I was going to ask you to name some of your competitors and then make fun of them, but let's not do that.
Are you sure we can do it?
I mean, if you want it, please go ahead. Like, that's great. But so I mean, would you be able to actually comment though, like on what you see like property developers are doing wrong at the moment, or maybe not wrong, but are they missing anything, or are they not taking advantage of how the market's changing?
I'd say some are, some aren't. I suppose quality of their marketing material and how they're positioning themselves is fairly critical. So the answer is some have done far better than others. I mean, pitfalls wise, nothing really that I can say that's kind of derogatory to any particular developer client or how they're doing it. I would say it's just their marketing really, and how much they're investing into their marketing to target. If we talk about international developers that are looking to target the overseas market, how much they're investing and where they're investing and spending their time, and also, because the market's become so much more competitive than it used to be. They need to do a lot more upfront work over a longer period of time, rather than very, very quickly coming into the market. So from a branding perspective, spending time on developing their brand in the market rather than just trying to push their product is what I'm saying. The ones that are doing that better and taking that advice on board are succeeding a lot more than others. That's probably what I would say on that.
I'd love to get your thoughts on. You're probably aware of what's going on in Australia and even China, where, like in Australia, you probably know Metricon and the controversies involved with that, and a lot of builders are going bust. And in China, you've got that
Evergrande,
a potential a huge recession coming because of the issues with real estate. Do you have any comments on that, and why this could be happening, and what we could potentially do to help prevent it?
I think that's. I mean, there's obviously a lot of, particularly what's going on in China and everything else. There's a lot of negativity, or developers have lost a lot of credibility by that, and therefore investors are far more, astute and nervous. I mean, we do a lot as a business. We do a lot of work upfront, early on, and we're very thankfully we've got some very good clients, but we're very kind of particular as to what we take on and what we get involved with, and huge amount of due diligence that we do. And I'd say that over the next couple of years, that's going to be even more critical because of what you just said around inflation and everything else. I mean, a lot. We're selling a lot of these projects that are off the plan, that will have been their cash. Developers will have done their cash flows a year ago, or they will have bought the land. And a lot of these, particularly the smaller developers, are already done on quite kind of tight margins anyway. So then they do their marketing, then they get the agents involved. So I think from an investor's perspective and consumers, that's really critical. Is really get under the bonnet as to what they're putting their money into. Because I think even more so that, as with interest rates going up and inflation and cost to build these developments, I think that's going to be even more critical than it has been over the last 5-10 years. So I hope that answers the question. But yeah, I think that's just what's going to be really important over the next few years. Because otherwise, it already does, unfortunately. It impacts everyone like ourselves in the market, who's trying to sell and market very good quality products and doing all of that work. If you got the other end of the spectrum and that doesn't happen, it can impact everyone.
No, so that's really interesting, because oddly enough, right, my follow-up question was going to be do you think real estate is going to continue to be a really good bet now with everything that's happening, right? Like you said, developers seem to have lost a lot of credibility in markets like China, and then maybe a little bit to Australia. Inflation, interest rates going up in Singapore, for example, inflation going up, recession in the rest of the world, inflation basically skyrocketing at this point. Is real estate still a
I
good
mean,
bet?
I personally believe so for the very reasons that I mean, none of us we haven't seen higher interest rates we've lived in a sort of lower interest rate world for a while now. So no one really remembers that. But fundamentally, real estate, it really does depend on where you're investing as well. As you said, China and those sorts of places. I mean, if you're looking at market, I mean, UK for example, UK, the fundamentals of the UK over the long term are still there. There's a massive undersupply, and it's only going to get worse. Than although the government there wanted to get better, there's a massive undersupply of housing, way below their annual targets. And then you've got a generation of buyers that can't afford to buy property. So the rental market is only growing, build to rent and everything else. So I think yes, over the medium to long term, no doubt about it. Probably the end of this year and early next year, there's going to be a lot of volatility. But will prices go down? Don't think so. Again, depends on the area that you're investing into. But I think as an asset class, the fundamentals are still there. Versus perhaps a more volatile stock market, and with inflation going up. So it depends on how long you want to put your money into property. But usually people want to invest for medium to long term. So I think it's still a good place to put your money.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are forgetting. Like my parents bought their house at 16% interest. I think 16 or 17% interest, and it all worked out fine. But then again, the affordability of housing was different back then, so it still isn't getting higher. But the interest rates were massive 20 years ago. So we've
Yeah,
just
no,
forgotten
we've just
what it
forgotten
felt
what it felt
like.
like, haven't we? We've lived in a low interest rate market. So I think once that settles down a bit, don't get me wrong, there's going to be some volatility, but I think looking forward, I think it's pretty good. I also think that from if you just look at a UK perspective, same as Australia, I suppose, but the domestic markets throughout COVID have all performed very, very well. So it's been difficult for international investors to get into the market. As you take cost of living crisis and everything else. I don't know how much you guys read about that in the UK, but there's no doubt about it that's going to impact the domestic market. So if you're sat here in Singapore and you're looking to buy in the UK, you've got the benefit of the currency being very good, and you've got the fact that actually it's going to be easier for you as an investor to get into the market and probably get better value than you have done over the last couple of years, because you're not going to be competing against the domestic market. So I think I'm an optimist, but I think it all kind of bodes quite well.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's a good point.
Now that is really interesting because, I mean, at least from a personal perspective, right? I think real estate's going to be a strong bet in Asian markets, at least, or like markets like Singapore, Hong Kong to some extent. It's always a strong bet if you can actually afford to
Yeah,
get into the market. It's a strong bet. But I think one thing that you mentioned quite interestingly, and I'm just is my last follow up on this one, is you said that as long as you make the right, or as long as depending on where you make your investment, or like what type of property you buy, that's when it's still a solid investment.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's what you said. Yeah, like what do you think would be like, is maybe not a bad investment, but is something that's either highly volatile or has a lower chance of, or has a potential chance of actually, like, even reducing in value?
Yeah, look, I think there are several parts to that. Where you invest in the cycle of a particular development. So if you invest early into it, then you get likely is you're going to get better value, or perhaps at the end of it. If we're talking about a new construction project, area is very important. You don't want to invest into an area where there's lots of saturation and lots of an area which has got lots of different construction projects all going on at once. You've got to be really careful about where you invest. So I think location is critical, and then developer or vendor, who's building it. I think that's also really, really important. getting under the bonnet of who is selling to you, and what their credentials are.
Okay, got it. No, that's interesting. That's actually really good to know, because I mean, I'm looking at it from the perspective as a potential investor into these things, and it's quite fascinating.
By the way, this is all for entertainment purposes only. Don't forget to do your research. don't go buying based on Tong's advice, everyone.
Buy, invest, put all your money into crypto. I heard Luna's a really good bet. Don't do it. No,
Just put everything. No, don't do it. Um, so my experiences with small business, Tong's business covers a few countries, and obviously James, you're taking over the world. What's always challenged me as a business owner is time management and deciding what on earth to invest my time in, because there's a billion things you can do, as you probably know. And I always feel guilty at the end of the day having such an encompassing company. Can you share any insights and tips on how you make decisions and how you manage your time, especially for such a growing company?
That's a really difficult one. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I hate emails. That's for sure. I mean, emails suck up too much time. So if anyone's got a good idea of how to get rid of those, that would be great. Um, but I think having, I mean, really, I mean, one of the most important things is having good people that work for you or work with you. Having people that you can trust, and then really working out where you should be investing that time, which is, I suppose, first and foremost, what's going to bring in revenue. So I personally now invest quite a lot of time into our clients, and working on those projects that we're gonna feed through to the rest of the business. And then trying to spend time on developing the individual teams within the business as well. So I think that's a big focus, and positioning of the brand. And I mean that's constantly where we're spending a lot of time on is how can we in what go back to what we were saying. What is a kind of crowded marketplace? Is how can we differentiate ourselves in the best way? But yeah, it's not easy. But I think if you can help me get rid of the emails or like anyone, that would be great. 5 emails a day would be
You can
perfect.
just ignore them. You can ignore them, delete Outlook, and just ignore them. That's what I do.
Yeah, no, Dave doesn't respond to emails at all. He sometimes sends me messages of a screenshot of an email saying, "Do you want to handle this?" I'm like, "No." That's the way he deals with things. No, so that's really interesting. Because I think, so like Dave was mentioning, I run a company spread across a couple of markets. It's a challenge, especially trying to understand or trying to figure out where best to put your time. And it's not because I want to do everything. I think it's more of about fighting fires here and there. It's about kind of stepping in when you need to. It's about if you don't do it, people aren't going to do it right. So trusting a team, I think, is really important. So I think that's really, really, really good advice, especially investing more time in really building out that team that you trust.
So do you guys have a set, look, for example, 30% of my time will be focusing on training up the team, 40% will be BD, 10% clients or something like that? Or is it just
Yeah,
kind of
I don't know.
reactive?
Probably try to segregate it, but a bit more reactive. I think that's the thing, is being pulled in where you need to be pulled in, and having that trust, because as in a growing business, there's always fires to fight. And I find as you grow more, it's more the bit becomes more about the people management and the different things that happen within those teams that you have to solve, which is not the bit that I enjoy, if I'm honest. But that's kind of comes with the territory. But that definitely takes up more time than you would want, and that's just trying to just trying to find a way to solve certain things. And that's been difficult throughout COVID. I don't think that changes because you're doing things in different countries, and also culturally as well. There's different nuances in different countries that you've got to be aware of, and that's certainly something that I've found, is just being aware of that, because it is different. Singapore's different to Hong Kong, and we've got team in the UK, and that's very different. So it's finding a way to balance that as well.
So James, so now you're managing different time zones now. How do you handle all of that?
Yeah, I mean that's a difficult one, and it's quite a contentious one at home sometimes, I have to say. But I mean, reality is a lot of our businesses, or a lot of our clients, are in the UK, so But I try to do 2 nights a week if I can, where I start later in the day or do something that's not meetings in the morning and then have meetings in the evening. I think that's so it is difficult, and it can get pretty straining. So you've got to try and balance that as much as possible, but it's not easy, with the different time zones. But I think anyone that's got businesses across different time zones will always face that as a problem. It is definitely difficult.
Yeah, no, there's always challenges. I think that everyone romanticizes starting a business, but let's be very fair. It kind of it sucks for the most part. The reward comes probably later on. I mean, honestly, starting
And
a
in
business
bits and in
sucks.
drips and drabs too. It's not like
Yeah,
ongoing rewards.
it's not like winning the lottery. It just sucks.
No, I mean that's probably the best way to describe it. I mean, running a business and owning a business is one of the best things, but also some days you wake up and you want to be working for someone else. That's the reality.
Yeah. Some days I just don't want to get out of bed. I just want to lie down, but I can't.
Yeah, me too.
So actually, can I can I ask you, right, James? So what advice would you give someone who's actually thinking of following your path a little bit, like settle down and opening up a business in Asia? Would you give them any advice?
Look, I think if they're thinking about it, and I mean, I tend to look at this. I tend to look at this issue in a sort of strange way. I mean, when I did it, I knew I wanted to do it. I'd never run a business. I'd worked for other companies. Never, not really. If I'm honest, not a clue what I was doing in many ways. But I didn't really think too much about it. I knew I wanted to do something, and I had this kind of vision, but I didn't really think too much about it. Would I do it again? Yeah, if you take COVID out of it, but I would 100% do it again, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it for the world. But yeah, if you're even, I think if you're entrepreneurial in any way and you're even kind of 50% there thinking about it, then you've got to take the leap and do it to a certain extent. Otherwise you'll always wonder, won't you? You can always go back to doing something else, but you'll always wonder whether you could have made it work.
Yeah, I think people tend to forget that they can actually. A lot of people actually have an opportunity to go back. The worst that would happen is you try, it doesn't work, but you can just go back to your doing what you were doing beforehand.
Yeah, a bit of a bruised ego.
There are going to be jobs.
You can go back, can't you? You can go back, and sometimes that might be actually quite nice.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a break. You're just like, yep, I hated being an entrepreneur. Now I'm just back and taking salary and getting paid to go to the toilet.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it.
Very true.
So in hindsight, what are some of the biggest misconceptions you had about Asia, before you probably went as a temporary visitor to now living in it and breathing it and running a business in it? Were there any big differences?
Yeah, do you know what? I mean, thankfully I'd spent quite a lot of time, albeit only traveling, but I'd spent quite a lot of time out in this part of the world before I relocated. I had the benefit of the extended family out here and back and forth quite a lot. But I was always back and forth regularly, but I was always going to the same places, staying in the same hotels. You had that kind of hotel restaurant life when I was traveling. So, yeah, it was. I'd say that was probably then moving here and setting up family and setting up life here. Not in a bad way at all, but that was just very. Does that make sense? It was just very very different because I did that for so many years, where you just come and stay in a hotel and you go to the same restaurants, living, setting up life.
Yeah, no, there's actually a really great joke that I heard very recently, which was a guy goes to heaven, and then he's living in heaven at the moment, and he's having a great time, but it's kind of mundane, right? Everyone's just sitting around, they're playing harps, people are sitting on clouds, and everything's great. He gets a day pass, goes to hell, and it's like basically Las Vegas on steroids, and he's having a great time. He's gambling, he's doing everything that he wants to do. He goes to St. Peter and says, I want to actually, can I shift to hell? It's way more fun. And St. Peter says, all right, but if you do that, you can't come back. And he's like, no worries. Like my entire life is going to be just partying, right? He goes down, and then it's basically facing like just torture all the time. It's horrible. His skin is burning. And then he asks the devil, like, what happened? He's like, the devil says, there's a difference between visiting hell and living in hell. It's two completely different things.
Are you saying Singapore is hell?
Nope, I didn't say that. I just want to be very clear. I didn't say that. If the government's listening, which they are, I didn't say that. Okay, You can't revoke citizenship. Actually, they can. They've done it before, but I'm just hoping they don't. But yeah, no. So that's actually oddly enough, that was the genesis of the question, because it's different when you visit, because everything's really nice when you visit a place, because you're so much in a bubble. You don't see the bad stuff. But then when you live for an extended period of time, you start to see the bad stuff on and off.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's definitely true. Yeah, you only see the the glitz of it, don't you? And then when you live somewhere for long
Yeah.
enough, then you see different things. But yeah, not in a bad way.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting looking at it from that perspective. That little whimsical, whimsical
I like how
interlude.
no one wants to say anything bad. Everyone just absolutely loves it over there. Me too. I loved it when I was there.
Hot. Singapore's really hot, man. That's what I'll say. Um, all right, James. I think we're coming close to the end bit, but before you go, we want to actually tap into your knowledge as a business leader and everything like that, right? So I've got a question, which is, and I think this is definitely written by David, which is, could you share some property tips for buyers right now? Anything that you can kind of share off the top of your head?
Property tips for buyers. Look, I think as going back to what I was saying earlier, making sure you really dig deep before making any kind of rash decisions as to what you invest into. That's pretty critical. If you're buying into it, that's if you're buying into a new construction project anyway, and the area that you're buying into, and buying early on in the development, and really thinking if you're going to be renting it out, really thinking about how you're buying it, the structure you're buying in it, because that's become very complicated compared to what it used to be. And if you don't get that right advice early on, and someone who's just selling you a property is selling you a property without asking those questions or making sure that you're thinking about how you're buying it, further down the line, whether that's tax related, buying in a personal name, a company, whatever it might be, making sure that that structure is right for you personally, and whether it's inheritance tax or whatever early on is critical, because otherwise that person selling your property could only be interested in just selling you that property and making a commission rather than acting in your interest. So, asking those questions early on is pretty important. And then making sure that you have got those ancillary services, particularly if you're buying overseas, that you've got someone that can help you with the lettings and management, can help you with all of that process to make it very easy. Otherwise you might be buying something halfway around the world, then it's going to be built in a few years time, and you've really got to think about who's going to manage that for you afterwards to make sure you get the best out of that investment and it's not a headache.
So make sure you contact James, everyone.
Make sure you contact One Global Group.
Not James. James is like, I don't talk to people.
Yeah, James doesn't like emails.
I would pass you on to the relevant person.
He'll respond to your email in 5 business days. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
So could you would love to get some of your wisdom. Could you share maybe 3 books or so that you would recommend to our listeners, or that have positively impacted you in some way?
Yeah, do you know what? I didn't know whether this was property related, but one is, two aren't. One is called Ninja Selling by Larry Kendall. That's a good read. And the other ones are not property related, but just good reads. One is called War Doctor by David Knott, and the other one is Through the Keyhole, which is Louis Theroux. So Through the Keyhole, which is very good. And a bit of fun as well. So those are definitely worth a read.
I haven't heard of any of them. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, look them up. See what you think. You might think I'm mad.
No, those sound really interesting. We normally always get the usual guys, from Shoe Dog to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and stuff like that. These are really interesting. I've never heard of these before.
So the last one was Through Over the Keyhole, was it?
Louis Theroux. I don't know if you're familiar with Louis Theroux, but Through the Keyhole. It's basically a candid take. It's about it's his story throughout COVID. It's just quite funny.
David's lying. He has no idea who you're talking about.
No, he does. He said he's a journalist, but he does funny little sort of documentaries, right?
Yeah, he's actually famous now amongst everybody who's young because on TikTok, because he has one of his audio clips went viral. That thing where he sang that song.
I don't think I've heard it.
Yeah, my body don't jiggle jiggle. It
Oh, is
flows,
that his
something like.
song?
That's him. That's him singing a song.
Oh, I thought it was someone else. Okay.
Because he actually went in deep on with the rap culture. He's really good. I actually quite enjoy him. Awesome. Okay, cool. Then I've got one last question, James, and I'm gonna let you go.
Sure.
Which is, can you share us like some of the biggest lessons that you can actually pass on to our listeners or our viewers?
One of the biggest ones, sorry.
Business lessons that you've, or it actually doesn't have to be business lessons. It could be anything. Could be life lessons. Could be anything that you think our listeners would gain value from.
Look, business lessons. I think I would say from a business perspective, if you're setting up a business,
Sorry,
growing a
James, you cut
business,
out again.
and my father always used to say this to me, and I never knew what he was on about really when I was younger.
I'm
Was
pausing it.
cash flow is king. Make sure you've always got cash flow, and you're always kind of making sure that you've got that in the right place, because it doesn't matter how much money you're earning as a business, but if you haven't got good cash flow or money in the right place, then you haven't got a business. So I think that's probably the one bit of advice that I would impart from a business point of view, and also, when you're setting up a business and you're setting up a business maybe in Singapore. Yeah. So look, I think there are many that I've learned. I think probably a couple of them would be, what my father always used to say to me: cash flow is king. And making sure that it doesn't matter how much money as a business you're making, if you haven't got cash flow in the right place, or you haven't got money in the right place, then that can be a problem. And as growing a business, that's pretty much a responsibility that you have day in, day out, is making sure you can pay everyone's bills. So that's pretty critical. And I think the other is, making those hard decisions quite quickly. So, if you've got to make a decision, and I mean this in terms of people decisions, i.e., there's non-performance in a company, or
Firing fast.
those difficult decisions that you might want to put off, make them sooner rather than later, in the right way, rather than letting it drag on, because that can be the worst thing, for both sides of the fence, if that makes sense. So, making decisions quickly and hoping that you're making the right decisions, but rather than procrastinating and letting things drag out and balloon and boil over, really. So hopefully that's a good bit of wisdom.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Sorry. No, I think that was really good. Cool. Thanks, James. I mean, that was really interesting. Dave, do you have any follow up for James? Anything else you want to share?
No, just one last thing is, how can people? By the way, firstly, thanks for those tips. So essentially, cash flow is king. That really helped us sell out in our business, like especially in Australia with insane amounts of taxes and just little things you need to pay. Cash flow. Oh man, we struggled because of cash flow and firing fast. I think that seems to be a tip that a lot of business people share. So, if people wanted to find out more about One Global Group or seek your assistance in with their developments or with their investments, how can they find out more about you?
Yeah, look, I think, well, first and foremost, you can go to our website, which is www.ogpsglobal.com, or you can send me an email, or you can give me a call on the phone, and I'll put you in touch with the right person. But always happy to have a chat.
Make sure to call them, don't email everyone.
Yeah, I might delete the email.
Well, yeah, we'll put the relevant links in our show notes for anyone who forgets.
All right, brilliant. Thank you, guys, and thanks for having me on. It's been great.
No worries. No worries, James. I think it was really good. I thought you gave some really, really good tips. And I'm just going to spend all my money on real estate right now. If I go broke, you're going to get a long email.
You won't read
long
it.
email.
But yeah, really appreciate your time and wisdom, James, especially for someone who's accomplished so much in this space. So thank you so much for your time. And for anyone else who's listening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check us out on all channels. Your support goes a long way. It helps us keep getting guests like James along. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.